again. I'm going to take you through IELTS speaking. So IELTS speaking typically doesn't last any longer than 15 minutes. It's very fast, but when you're nervous and it's exam day, it feels like a million years. All you need to bring is your passport and yourself. So you'll sit down, it's just going to be you doing the test and the examiner, and you show the examiner your passport, just to make sure that it's you doing the test. So you have some recording equipment, they record you, so they can listen to it again. Sometimes there's two examiners as well, so sometimes one, sometimes two. Don't be freaked out, you don't have to speak to both of them. Only one of them is going to be answering, or asking the questions rather. So it's divided into 3 parts. So after they check your ID, 4 to 5 minutes is called familiar discussion. It's called familiar discussion because the topics are going to be really easy, really easy. The point of this, I think, is just to relax you. It's going to be something about your studies, where you've travelled, family, hobbies, really, really typical things like that, where, you know, things that you'd ask somebody that you've just first met. So this would follow more or less a kind of a natural flow of conversations. They'll ask you maximum about 4 questions. Then parts 2 and 3, it gets a little bit more exam-like and a little bit more formal. So 3 to 4 minutes, it's called extended speaking. So what the examiner is going to do, they're going to give you a little card like this. You have to read the card and take some notes on the card. So you'll be given pen and paper. So you have 1 minute to take notes, and then you have to speak continuously for a minimum of 1 minute and maximum of 2 minutes. So the example we have here is describe a TV show or film which made an impression on you. And they might ask for further details. Where did you see the film or TV show? How old were you? You know, in what ways has it made an impact on your life? What genre is the book? So was it like a fantasy book like Game of Thrones, or was it a TV show like Breaking Bad? Then they'll also ask you 1, maybe 2 follow-up questions. So if they feel there's something you kind of didn't cover, they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you a question. Now, the little point here says cover all the points given. A lot of students don't read it that carefully. They start taking notes and their mind runs away with them, and if you don't cover like 2 points, that will affect your score. So you need to answer the question that you're asked. They'll stop you after 2 minutes as well. If you run out of things to say, just think of further examples. Okay, and the last part is going to be 4 to 5 minutes, and it's going to be topic discussion. So, TV show or film which made an impression on you, that topic is the media. So all the questions that are going to be in part 3, they're going to be on media. They won't be on war, they won't be on politics, nothing else, just media. So examples would be, do people watch too much TV nowadays? How reliable is the news? Is the quality of TV programs declining or increasing? For these questions, you have to give a full answer. So for example, do people watch too much TV nowadays? Yep. You can't just say yes or no. You have to give an explanation for your answer. A better answer would be, do people watch too much TV nowadays? And I would say, that's a difficult one. I think the younger generation are watching less TV nowadays because they have the internet. While they'd still watch different TV programs through their laptop, I think traditional things like news, quiz shows are declining. People watch series. Whereas older people, I think they tend to watch more TV. Something like that. So that's way longer than a yes or no answer. Okay, so we'll have a look at the tips. So speaking is something that kind of seems easy, but then people try it and they're like, oh my god, what happened? When you are in exam conditions, you tend to get really, really nervous, and some people experience a kind of a disconnect between mouth and brain. That's okay. If you practice, this won't happen to you. So keep these tips in mind when you're doing the exam. So the first one is to not go off topic. Answer the question you're asked. So if I'm asked, do people watch too much TV nowadays? And I only talk about my grandmother and how much I hate her and all she does is watch TV and she never helps around the house. That's off topic. That's not really what they're looking for. The next tip is ask for clarification if necessary. So say you didn't hear the question or you don't really understand what it means, ask another question about it. So, are you talking about this or this? Or you could say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Would you mind repeating it? Or could you say that again, please? I didn't hear you. There's no shame in asking for clarification. You're not going to be deducted marks. The next thing is your body language and the way you carry yourself. So I've said here, speak to the examiner. A lot of students tend to get really nervous and they look at the table or they look at the recording equipment and they don't make eye contact with the examiner. So I know it's not a normal conversation, but you have to pretend like it is. So use gesticulation, smile, make eye contact. Not too much though, because then they'll be freaked out. So pretend like it's a normal conversation, but at the same time bear in mind that you will be using slightly more formal language. This is not a conversation between you and your friend in the pub. The next tip is no prepared speeches. So the topics in IELTS tend to be kind of predictable. What some people do is that they memorize speeches beforehand. Don't do this. Examiners are trained to spot this. So they'll know when you're doing it. And all they're going to do is they're just going to change the question. So if they feel you're doing this, you will be deducted marks and they're going to change the question anyway. So you're not going to have an opportunity to practice your memorized speech. And then the most important thing is appropriate range of vocabulary and linkers. So you have to sequence your ideas. If you say, I think, a million times, this is a disaster. You should say, in my view, in my opinion, personally, if you ask me. See, different things. You can't say the same thing over and over again. And linkers, stuff like but, however, for instance, on the other hand. If you're going to give examples, for instance, such as, to give one example that comes to mind, to illustrate this, different words like that are really, really important. And I know we don't use them in everyday life, but in IELTS you have to. You're trying to show the way that you communicate can be clear and easy to understand, and you're trying to show that you know a lot of vocabulary. The next tip is to record yourself. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have a smartphone or can get a hold of some kind of recording equipment. Most of us, when we hear ourselves speak, we get super embarrassed. It's okay, you have to fight it. Record yourself, you and your friend can do this. Record yourself answering some IELTS question and then listen to it, repeat it back. And as you listen to it, take some things into consideration. Okay, so correct your mistakes. Or get a friend to listen to it and see, can they find any mistakes? Listen to your pacing. Are you too slow? Are you too fast? How much can you say in 1 minute? This is really, really important for your strategy. Because if you have the wrong idea, say for example, you answer each question here and it takes you like 3 minutes, you're only going to be able to answer 2 questions. So know how much can I say, speaking normally, in 1 minute, in 2 minutes. Really, really useful to do this. And you can listen to things like your accents, listen to things like, your range of vocabulary and linkers as well. So you can say, oh, okay, I say, I think 7 times. Maybe I could use something else. So, the next tip is to use an appropriate range of vocabulary and linkers and examples. Now, this is perhaps the most important tip. So, repeating yourself, repeating various phrases is a big no-no. You need to show your examiner that you know a lot of words. So instead of saying I think, you could say I believe, in my opinion, in my view, lots of different things you could say. You should also use linkers, so don't just use but all the time. Use however, although, on one hand, on the other hand. When you're giving examples, it's important to precede your examples with things like such as, for instance, for example. One thing that brings to mind or springs to mind, or to illustrate this, all things like that. It's very important not to repeat yourself, which is, it's just paramount. Don't repeat yourself. Even though that this is a thing that happens to people. When you're nervous, try to fight it. Next, correct your mistakes. So if you hear yourself say something and you go, oh crap, I've made a mistake. Don't panic. You can just correct yourself. Native speakers even make mistakes. It's perfectly natural. So you can say something like, oh, I didn't mean to say this, I meant to say that. Or X rather than Y. Or pardon me, excuse me, sorry. And just say the thing that you wanted to say correctly. So to give an example, I really liked the Game of Thrones. Sorry, I meant to say just Game of Thrones. Something like that. Okay, and that's it for the tips. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. I'll try and address them in my next videos. See you next time, bye bye.